When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Grit is in you. It's in your passion, your perseverance. It's in every challenge you face and overcome. Grit is in you. It's never in rockin' protein. Never settle.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive, America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Everything is more exhilarating when you're on your motorcycle, just like your bike is more protected when you choose Progressive Motorcycle Insurance. They offer coverage for your bike, starting as low as $75 per year. And they keep things affordable, with discounts like paid in full, multi-policy, and responsible driver. So raise your kickstands and get to quoting at Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. $75 premium is for state minimum coverage. Not available in D.C. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
Hello, mega orderers. When we talk about the war in the Middle East in these episodes, we are speaking about Gaza and not yet about the Iran matters. However, the larger themes in a way have just become more true in terms of the nature of the disorder. Please enjoy. I'm Jason Pack.
And I'm Alex Hall. And this really is the final formal episode with me as a co-host on Disorder, the podcast where we try to find order in our mad world. And I am realizing that it must be something to do with my completely ridiculous surname, Hall, that I talk about mad, and final. It seems to be a way of speaking in my family.
And that's why I sing a song about my mom, to repack and unpack, to be Sandy Pack, to repack and unpack. So this makes sense why you talk about the mad world. So Alex, a lot has changed from when we started the show in September of 2023 and now. Is there more disorder? Are there rays of hope? Did we anticipate the disorder that we're living in, but yet it has played out differently? Thoughts?
Okay, this is going to be a serious episode. We were chatting about how we were processing this moment emotionally. Here it's more on the substance. So you and I began this pod in September 2023. I fear that the disorder that you were predicting and seeing and you had extrapolated from your experience in Libya is becoming more serious, more entrenched, and more widespread. And in terms of the sort of developments that I'm really sort of drawing out from the last 18 months, the first is my sense that the centre is only holding on by a thread. And that thought we had when Biden won the election in 2020, and I'm not a particular fan of Joe Biden's, I don't think his presidency was brilliant, but there was this sense when he got elected, thank God Trump is gone, and maybe there's a chance for America to course correct. But what it turns out to have been was a blip, and we're back in Trump world, and Trump is stronger and more dangerous than ever. And so a year ago, we saw Keir Starmer get elected, and we thought, thank goodness, the Conservatives are gone, and hopefully British politics will enter a more normal phase. But actually, Starmer's doing okay, but the threat from reform is real, and the threat from populism is real. And centrists everywhere across Europe are being challenged in similar fashion. So we may take comfort that Donald Tusk won in Poland, but then you have a right-wing leader that's been elected as president there. So I think we're seeing these currents.
And Donald Tusk had his approval ratings tank just like Starmer's did. Starmer's greatest favorability was the day he went into office, and it's been down, 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 down. And I don't think it's fair. Like, the day that we're recording this, he's at an AI summit here in West London or whatever, speaking with the chairman of NVIDIA, saying very interesting things about training Brits for the AI economy and preparing for the automation of things about planning applications. And I'm like, yeah, do it. Go for it. He doesn't get any credit for some of the good things he does. Yes, could Rachel Reeves have been better? Could they have communicated better and not cut the winter fuel allowance and blah, blah, blah? Yes. But the Polish elections are so relevant at this point because Donald Tusk is like the man. And yet the neo-populist right and Musk attacking him and pumping the anti-migrant pro-culture war thing is always taking down these centrists.
Just to counter that a little bit, I mean, actually, arguably, the Trump attacks, for example, in Canada, actually served to help Mark Carney get elected. And then in Australia, arguably, there was a backlash against sort of Trumpian rhetoric that helped a more moderate
But mostly we're in an anti-incumbency thing. In other words, the Trumpian stuff only helps if a non-incumbent is running. Incumbents are just so screwed in today's throw the baby out with the bathwater. Whatever we have now, we hate.
So the headwinds against traditional democracy is very, very strong. And the narrative is being set by the populists. It's about migration. It's about cultural wars. I mean, so the terms of debate have been shifted onto favourable ground for the populists. So that's my first sort of real worry. My second real worry, and you alluded to this last time about how it's affecting you personally, but when we began the pod, just like Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, mistakenly said, the Middle East has never been so quiet. And it turns out that no presidency ever escapes a crisis in the Middle East. And this one is profound. And you and I both feel it very personally and very viscerally. And what's happened both on 7th of October and since then has sort of passed all conscience. And I'm just going to say this. When the 7th of October attacks occurred, I wrote a piece saying, but me no buts, nothing that the Palestinians have suffered or endured, and I think they've suffered and endured a lot since the establishment of Israel, nothing justified Hamas's attacks. And I'm afraid nothing which happened on the 7th of October justifies the extent to which Israel is behaving right now. It has passed grotesquely beyond what is acceptable.
But the only problem is by saying Israel and not Netanyahu or the Netanyahu government, I think that you color a nation and a people with the actions of a leader.
Yes, I do, because it is unacceptable to me that the Palestinians are suffering collective punishment for the actions of Hamas. Israel is a democracy. In Gaza, they have not had any elections since 2004, and yet the people who justify what Israel is doing say, well, the Palestinians voted for Hamas, and in their way, they are collectively responsible for
I don't
shielding
think that's
Hamas.
a main argument, Alex.
No, but I'm saying there's a double standard here, because I think it's
I would argue there's a double standard on the other side. No one blames you as a newly naturalized American for the Trump policy of putting kids in cages. You happen to vote, but you voted against it, but you're an American. Are you responsible for the putting of the kids in cages and for the calling out of the National Guard? And I don't think Israel is doing these things in Gaza. We have a horrible neo-populist criminal Netanyahu government, which has a very prominent role for some very fringe ideological settlers, particularly Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, but there are others. And they're doing a policy which the vast majority of Israelis are against. 70% of Israelis that are polled are always saying we'd like Netanyahu to be out. So there's the double standard. No one blames Americans for the fact that Trump is putting kids in cages or whatever. And when you walk around in Hampstead, people hear an American accent and they have sympathy for you. They don't blame you for for what the Trump regime is doing. But yet, when it comes to Israel, people say, oh, Israelis or Jews are responsible for what's being done there. And that's the bit that I just want to push back on, because this discourse is so prevalent and it really gets under my skin.
Okay, so of course I don't disagree with your point, but I was making a different point. I was using the very fact they justify what's going on in Gaza by saying, well, Palestinians, if they don't like it, they shouldn't support Hamas, when the Palestinians have almost no ability to get rid of Hamas.
I mean, I don't know anyone who uses that argument.
Yep. And yet, we're expected to absolve Israel, that is a democracy, that does have a vote. That's the double standard I'm talking about. Of course, I agree with you. It's Netanyahu and his leaders. I understand there's an opposition in Israel. I understand that opinion polls show that they don't support what's being done in their name. But I'm saying the Palestinians are being held collectively responsible and suffering for the actions of a militia group, a terrorist group, that they are finding it impossible to oust. And yet we're supposed to give Israel, which is a democracy, more generous terms. And I am so fed up with the failure of Western governments to hold the Israeli government accountable and to pursue more rigorously the charges which I feel are 100% warranted of war crimes against this government. They are starving a people to death. And it's like watching a form of obscene Hunger Games, drawing Palestinians to food collection sites and then shooting them while they are there. That is the other thing that has pervaded this series. And I don't think you and I disagree.
We don't disagree on that part, but I just really need to point out this unilateral obsession with that it is somehow the responsibility of Biden or Starmer to have held Israel to account, to me, is completely bogus. No one says that we're complicit with the fact that the rapid forces in Sudan did or didn't do this massacre. You know what I mean? And they're doing it with arms that are manufactured by French and American companies that the Saudis and Emiratis have supplied them with, right? So I want to say the responsibility is with the Netanyahu government and with the generals and crazy ideological settlers and whoever dreamed up and implemented this plan, right? I don't want to say Biden or Jake Sullivan or whoever who didn't stop it, because then it's like, wait a second, it purports a bizarre neo-colonial relationship with Israel that no one says we're supposed to have stopped these massacres that are happening in Sudan. And people forget that tens of thousands of babies have been killed in Sudan, and there's famine and there's whatever. The fact is, there is really nothing Kiir can do to change who Netanyahu is. Whether or not he recognizes a Palestinian state in the House of Commons, he says he'll enforce the ICC warrant or not. The fact is, we have this Israeli leader. He doesn't take his orders from Downing Street. And I want to point that out because it's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy maybe for different reasons that it is immediately apparent.
So I will disagree agreeably, because I constantly hear this argument made that, oh, well, I never hear you express concern about Sudan or the violence in Yemen or Burma. Only when it's Israel and Gaza do we get this much concern. But again, I disagree. There is absolutely no one in the British establishment ever trying to justify what's happening in Sudan or debating
but no one
whether
cares
or not
about it.
we
It's
should
never
send...
on the news, Alex. I watch the BBC every day. You never see anything about it.
The difference is that we still justify some of what Israel does, and we have pulled our punches in terms of calling out. I agree, we may not have the power or the authority or the levers to force this to end. But we could certainly be more critical and more outspoken. We have tiptoed to this. And This has gone on now for over 600 days.
There's a lack of bloody leadership. But the lack of leadership, I would argue, is for slightly different reasons. What should have happened is Biden and Kiir should have banged the heads together of the Qataris and Saudis and Egyptians to make an offer that no one could refuse. Here's the $300 billion for the reconstruction. And guess what? You have to turn over the administration of Gaza. No Israeli occupation, no this, no that. And it's a failure of creative thinking and diplomacy. It's not a failure to hold to account. Because the reason why this idea that there's some moral failing is then it, to my mind, applies a double standard that only is applied to Israel. And no one is applying some moral standard to the Assad regime when they're butchering their own people. And that's the part that I struggle with when I hear you express.
There are things then that could be done that aren't being done. So that leads on to my third point very nicely. And I agree with you about the lack of leadership. That leads me on to my third point. I think the world is entering a phase where we're really suffering from the loss of American leadership. The US, certainly under this administration, doesn't want to lead the world or only wants to be a power in the world to its own sort of short-sighted benefit or even to the Trump family benefit in some cases.
I think this is an important point. They have now made foreign policy about enriching and strengthening their clan and family. Sometimes it's son-in-law, sometimes it's the father-in-law of this of the nephew of my cousin. Foreign policy is no longer about any principles, but we know a guy who owns some crypto who just made $1 billion on this trade.
Exactly. So it's unprincipled. The US doesn't want to mediate conflicts. It doesn't have the patience to do so, for one thing. So I think on Ukraine, Russia, and on Israel, Gaza, I don't think they're willing to apply the sort of serious effort that is required.
Of course, he's not even transactional enough to be patient to get the transaction to try to end the war in a corrupt way. He's not even scheming enough to get his corrupt payout because you'd have to follow through enough to make that happen.
Yeah. So, but then the sort of more fundamental problem is the sort of absolute lack of moral principles. And it turns out that although we all used to criticize America all the time for not doing this or doing too much of that or failing to do this well enough or failing to prepare for the aftermath, I think we all took it for granted that at the end of the day, there was some kind of moral leadership provided by America under previous presidents. It was imperfect. It was inconsistent. It wasn't always well executed. But there was a moral leadership there. There was a standing up for principles. There was a sense of values underpinning American foreign policy. And that loss is so damaging. The reluctance now to uphold international norms, to adhere to global standards, to try and make the system work. We all used to criticize America all the time. And they're like, fine, we're just not going to bother anymore. We're just going to screw you, do it yourself. If you think you can do it better, look after your own self and we'll look after ourselves. And the loss is terrible.
I always said during the Iraq War stuff, W. Bush is bad, but when some Chinese guy is running the world and they launch the invasion of Kyrgyzstan, it's going to be worse. So the point is to try to support the more centrist and progressive forces in America, not to just trash the West.
We took America for granted. We took its leadership for granted. And we took its moral values for granted. And it's gone.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. It's gone.
It's also even worse for people like you and I who really valued that old kind of America with genuinely Western values of progress, tolerance.
Universal values. They're universal values.
Meritocracy. I think that they are values that emerged in the West and can become more universal over time. And I agree what you say there, or I can respect your perspective, but man, are my unborn children going to miss a world without some kind of Anglo-American democratic leadership.
Yeah. So that's really the sort of the third trend, and it's very worrying. I mean, that there's a moral vacuum now, and I think we're not the first to say this. Everybody's writing about it now and commenting on it, but that post-World War era where we set up international organizations, we tried to have international conventions, we tried to draft standards that people would abide by, certain norms that countries would adhere to, pacts of non-aggression, not seizing territory by force, not trying to ethnic cleanse, trying to respect asylum, trying to improve the human rights of people, respect, and there was a sense that democracy was spreading, free and fair elections. It may not be our form of democracy. It may not always have the same application in every country, but there were basic sense that there were certain universal values and universal standards that we would try and promote and support. And that is eroding very, very fast and crumbling. And we're moving to a different era. We're moving to an era, I think we may have talked about this in a previous episode. Some people say it's an era of great power competition, but there was an excellent article in one of the foreign affairs magazines who said, actually, it's great power collusion. It's where Russia and China and the US sort of collude and divvy up the world and divvy up the spoils, and the smaller powers must survive as they can.
I like the misquoting of Thucydides here. It's the...
Thank you.
The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must.
That's it. Exactly. Thank you. I trust you are the intellectual in this. I'm the hack commentator here, but
not exactly, Alex, but I'll take a compliment when it comes. Speaking of philosophy or psychology, and I think Thucydides was a great psychologist as well as a historian and philosopher, what have you learned about how the human animal works from doing the pod? What have you learned about how people tick from interviewing them? I feel like I've learned a ton. I will save some of my observations because I'm so keen to hear yours.
Oh, that's really nice. I think we've had some wonderful guests who have shed light both on the issues they cover and, again, going back to the sort of human impact, but also the sort of resolve that people have had to face up to their situation. So you and I have often talked about the wonderful Evgenia Kara-Murza. So I was at a conference about 6 weeks ago where she and her husband were there drinking cocktails, and everybody was saying, we could not believe that here you would be sitting, drinking, having cocktails together. And Roger Carstens, the US negotiator who facilitated their release, he was the one who said, this makes my job worthwhile to see the two of you having drinks together. And they've not given up the fight. They are campaigning for the fate of the thousands of other Russian political prisoners. So it's the people who serve a cause bigger than themselves, which was John McCain's favorite quote. And I think we've had lots of people on the pod who have served causes bigger than themselves and who've been willing to take personal risks. We had as one of our guests Miles Taylor, who was the author of the anonymous op-ed in the first Trump administration, where he reported that there were people within the administration who were horrified by what he was trying to do and were trying to uphold law and norms of democratic behavior. And Miles Taylor has now been the subject of an executive order by Trump targeting by name him and another Trump one colleague, Chris Krebs, who is in charge of election security in 2020. And Trump has asked the Department of Justice to investigate both of them for potential treason. And that is just horrifying to me.
The Miles Taylor stuff is so bloody scary because a lot of the moral courage that you mentioned there is moral courage on the center right. Because these people saw it on the inside, Volker, Taylor, others, Scaramucci, and then they're like, oh my God, I need to be a whistleblower. I'm holding up the flag. I'm pointing out what's going on. And because this guy is so into loyalty and revenge, as soon as you do something that's principled, he takes revenge on you. I am worried for him, Miles Taylor, because if I'm at position 47,024 and you're at position 38,026 on the enemies list, he's at position 19. And if you're high enough up the enemies list, God knows what these people are going to throw at you. And we haven't even mentioned the Elon-Trump feud. Imagine having two of the most powerful men on earth waging this unbelievably disorderly feud where they no longer care about principles and the things that they said that they were doing together. You know what I mean? Like, they said that they agreed on all this stuff, and now, I'm funding this rival political party, and I'm saying he was in the Epstein files, and then we're attacking this, and we're not giving the Rockets these contracts. But you said that you guys had these shared principles. And that, to me, is the enduring disorder when everything is about one day I do A, and now I'm doing the opposite of A. And the ship of state and the ability to regulate AI and deal with climate change is never going to be done when we're busy careening back and forth.
Yeah. Okay. So you asked me sort of what I've learned about the pod and human psychology. So one is I've learned that there are people out there with true moral courage and who do serve a cause bigger than themselves. The other thing is, and I don't think all politicians are the same, however, the sheer pusillanimity and weakness of current leaders is really horrifying. And we've had people on the show who have exposed the failure to shore up democracy, the failure to control contributions to the Conservative Party, the failure to respect election results, the attempts to enrich themselves personally, the grifting of too many of our current leaders, that loss of sense of national service and national duty. So it's kind of those sort of two things. And then if I want to talk about moral courage, the third aspect of the show that I've absolutely loved has actually been the questions. One, just from a sheer vanity point of view, in that it's kind of a relief to know that somebody's actually out there listening to what we say and inspired or annoyed enough to actually write in. That's actually very nice. We're not just speaking in a forest and nobody's out there. So it's very nice to get that feedback. And it doesn't matter whether it's agreeing or disagreeing. I believe in healthy disagreement. So I like it when people challenge and push back on us. But the thing I like more about questions is if you care enough to actually sit down and write, it means you care enough about the issues. And the questions are really good. And they force me to think, and they force me to check my assumptions or force me to nuance what I say, because I speak quite forcibly sometimes. I speak in quite untempered fashion sometimes, and I like it when I'm called to account or to explain or to be a bit more nuanced. So that's the third thing that I've really liked.
And I like the listeners' questions for all the reasons that you say, and I think it's more than shared vanity. It's the sense that we're a community going through this together.
Absolutely.
I find enduring disorder is quite lonely, Alex. Although I know that I'm not suffering alone, part of why Northern London suits me and having you on the pod and having these discussions is a community of people who care about these things, see them similarly. They may have a nuance different on Gaza. They may see this a little differently, but we're in it together. Do you know what I mean? We are thinking about and reading and engaging in this and donating to charity or speaking at think tanks. And I feel quite lonely in this struggle. And please write us at disordershow@gmail.com with the questions you want to hear about, the topics you'd like to find out about. And even if Alex has stepped back, she is going to once in a while get an email from me with one that I think will make her smile if you want to engage with her.
I should have added that the other thing that I like about the show is the perspectives and maybe this is sort of the last thing, is the different perspectives we've brought. With you as an American going to London and me as a Brit coming to America, I think that's been quite an unusual dynamic because we're immersed in where we currently live, but we didn't grow up where we currently live. So we still bring a little bit of an outsider's perspective and an observation. So I bring an outsider's perspective to America, even though I'm now living in America and I'm experiencing everything that's going on in America. And you bring an outsider's gaze to what's going on in the UK, and you call out some of the absurdities of the British system, like getting your car insured or not. So you can call out some of the absurdities of our system, even as you're living in it and you like it.
Yep.
Right?
So, Alex,
So I like that.
we've done this pod. It's been a great journey to go on with you. I've learned a lot. I'm going to just say about the human animal, the moral courage, I didn't get really what it was to be willing to die for your principles and be calm while doing it. I got that some people die for their principles. Experiencing, as we have Browder and Evgenia Karamurza and Miles Taylor, exactly what you said. Their inner calm is like they might as well be the Mahatma or the Dalai Lama relative to, say, how I feel emotionally and psychologically. And that is so inspiring. So I want to amplify what you've said there. And it has changed the way that I think about the role of principles and public engagement. Now, where do we think things are going to go next? When we're back, Alex will tell us what beeth that which mayeth happeneth nexteth.
This is History's Heroes. People with purpose, brave ideas, and the courage to stand alone, including a pioneering surgeon who rebuilt the shattered faces of soldiers in the First World War.
You know, he would look at these men and he would say, "Don't worry, Sonny, you'll have as good a face as any of us when I'm done with you."
Join me, Alex von Tunzelmann, for History's Heroes. Subscribe to History's Heroes wherever you get your podcasts.
Alex, we are back. What beeth that which shall or shall not happeneth nexteth?
Oh, prophetess and seer, am I Cassandra predicting doom and no one is listening? What will happen and what should we do about it? Well, I don't have any particularly witty or original way of saying this. I think it's going to get bad before it gets better.
I agree agreeably.
I was at the memorial service for a wonderful American diplomat and former military officer, Richard Armitage, who was Colin Powell's deputy during the Iraq and Afghan wars and the horrors of the 9/11 attacks. And he was a hero from Vietnam era. He was a formidable character. One of the reasons he was so famous is he's absolutely massive physically. He had this huge barrel chest and this gruff voice and very imposing physically. He looked like the classic bull in the china shop. And at his memorial, a Japanese diplomat joked about the time everyone assumed he was the president's bodyguard because they couldn't believe he was actually an official because he was so huge. Anyway, there was a very moving... There were tributes to him from many, many different people. And I wrote about his memorial service. And one of the things I lamented is I couldn't imagine any American dignitary, let alone foreign ones, speaking about Marco Rubio or Pete Hegseth or any of today's leaders in such glowing terms.
And in fact, Alex, I need to jump in because the absurdity is they don't have the mental capacity to even grasp the statesmanship of someone like Dick Armitage. You know what I mean? It's not only that you can't imagine them getting a eulogy of this kind, they don't even understand what being a real statesman is.
No. And so Dick Armitage was described by a Vietnamese attendee as someone who had an unshakable resolve to do what was right. And the Vietnamese speaker was recalling when Dick Armitage, as a young naval officer in about just before the fall of Saigon, defied the US government to shepherd over 30,000 Vietnamese refugees to safety in the Philippines, on the eve of the fall of Saigon. I mean, an absolutely heroic act. And this Vietnamese speaker was one of those who he rescued. He shepherded the entire South Vietnamese fleet out of the region before the South collapsed. So, I mean, that's a classic example of the sort of decline in leadership. So at the memorial service, someone quoted and hailed Armitage as being the quintessential, quote, man in the arena, which refers to a speech by Teddy Roosevelt at the Sorbonne in 1910. And I want to read it because it really profoundly spoke to me.
And it's also what Tom Brady's book and Netflix series starts with. It's arguably the most famous political quote now in the American lexicon. Please read it for us, Alex.
Okay. And this is a little bit of a criticism against myself, actually, because it says it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never knew victory or defeat. And I want to quote that because when I'm thinking about what's going forward, is I think social media has amplified our tendency to criticize from the sidelines, to carp and to say, oh, Starmer's useless, or, you know, Macron's hopeless, or why can't they do this, or why can't they do that? And I've been really critical of politicians. In fact, I'm constantly saying I wish they should have done this or they should have done that. But at the end of the day, I think going forward, we have to not just tear down the people who are in the arena, but find ways to support them and encourage people into politics. And at the same memorial of Dick Armitage, I ran into Bridget Brink, who was the former US ambassador to Ukraine, who just resigned about 6 or 7 weeks ago because she could no longer stomach the instructions that she was being given by Donald Trump. And she is looking at running for Congress, and she is going to try and stand for office from Michigan. And I admire that. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines. It's really good to throw your hat into the ring. So you asked me, what do I think is going to happen next? I think things are going to get bad. I very much worry about where we're headed over this summer in America. But I have faith that American democracy will reassert itself. Americans are too bloody minded to take this lying down. I think the values of democracy run deeper within us, that they are values that we have come to embrace. And I think there will be a pushback, and I think there will be an effort to reassert those norms. It's going to take a lot longer to rebuild trust, but I think we will come out of it. I hope.
From your mouth to God's ears, Alex, I so hope that that is the case. And I want to riff briefly off this man in the arena a bit. I mean, if only our politicians today could, in just throwaway remarks, speak with this rolling prose, getting at the nature of the human condition and expressing things so eloquently. I just don't think there are going to be Roosevelts and Churchills anymore, let alone can we even have Clintons and Blairs. That seems a bygone era in terms of the amount of charisma and eloquence. I want to point out that what we are doing and what we're trying to do is not just to be critics. We may not be in the arena, i.e. we're not running for elected office, but I hope that what we are doing is trying to shine a light on what is possible and what's being done wrong. And I think that you do that very well. And if you want to see in the round what you're up to. I think that you, in your post-FCDO life, are shining a light on what can be done, what is done wrong, and genuine orderings of the disorder. We propose things that might work. And I want to just point out to the mega orderers that there are many ways to be in the arena. It's not like if you just are not running for office that you're not doing anything.
That's a good note to end on. I've really enjoyed being on this show. I've learned a lot. I do think it's a good podcast. I think the quality of guests has got better and better and better. I think the quality of our interviewing skills has got better. I recall the early days where we probably over-prepared and then couldn't have these free-flowing conversations. And I think that's actually been a very nice dynamic.
Alex, I just need to point out, because you love being right, this is something, among many things, that you were right about. I wanted to live in a world where it would be very good to have quite a scripted interview to get in certain points. Like, I really want to hear what Jonathan Powell has to say about exactly what happened in 1999 at this meeting in Belfast. But the reality is, more important is just interacting with the guest, not only having a laugh, but seeing what emerges from the conversation, his worldview, and that comes from chat and being present. And you understood that. I think, one, you have more life experience than me, but probably your life as a diplomat led you to realize that you're probably going to get the best content by rolling with the punches rather than sticking to the script. And this is a realization that I have emerged from this 18 months of working with you that you were on top of already.
This is really funny. I think that's my epitaph for the show and possibly for my life. Alex, she never stuck to the script. And I think that's quite a good quality, personally.
And then in not sticking with the script, allow me to say, Alex, I want to give you a great farewell. You have been a true mega orderer. We might not have been able to do this show if you didn't take the plunge with me. Do you know what I mean? We met each other for the first time in the idea of, would you like to spend 2 hours a week on live air with me and have to essentially have the intimacy of having these heavy conversations and coordination. You took that plunge. I will be forever grateful. And I think that it's been a fascinating exploration of our different perspectives, and I hope that it's made good audio.
Amen to that. Well, that's definitely enough from me. And that's enough from you too, Jason.
Alex, it's more than enough from you. Allow me to say good riddance. If people want to order the disorder in an Alex-free way, they can subscribe to the Substack and follow our YouTube channel for extra videos that hopefully make you laugh and giggle as much as Alex has done for me just now.
So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much, George, for teaching me how to use all the equipment, because I was useless on all of that. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and I hope you have an orderly week.
Woo! Miss you, Alex. I miss you already.
Bye.
Bye. Hello, hello, mega orderers. We strive in partnership with the new production company Evergreen to create the best possible listening experience for you, the orderer. We appreciate your feedback about the show. We want to learn about you. What topics would you like? What kind of sponsors do you want to hear about? How we have a better experience? If you go to theshowsurvey.com/disorder, you can take a short anonymous survey and you will be entered in a drawing to win a $100 or £100 Amazon gift certificate. Again, that's theshowsurvey.com/disorder. Quick survey. It helps the show. And each week, we will select a winner from participating. So you have a really high chance of winning. That's you, mega orderers. Go fill out the survey.
Are you tired of starting your day with pointless political arguments, superficial summaries, and lukewarm hot takes on the radio?
Then switch to The Bunker, where we look at the news without the nonsense.
Every weekday morning, The Bunker brings you a brand new, in-depth look at just one story.
From the chaos in Washington to the seismic political shifts in the UK.
To business, economics, history, and pop culture.
Or start your week, our essential Monday morning roundup of the week's upcoming stories.
We cut through the noise to bring you what matters.
That's The Bunker, news without the nonsense. Every weekday with me, Andrew Harrison,
Ross Taylor,
Jacob Jarvis,
Gavin Essler,
Sing Sing,
and me, Seth Jebel.
Find us wherever you get your podcasts.